Let's talk about Last Orders specifically. So it's been 4 years. It's still not finished. Where are we? Where are we in the process? When will people see our film?
Well, okay, so we finished the filming. So now we are in sort of post limbo, where we're trying to look at some of the audio, some of the text, because a lot of that, having been filmed on location, a lot of it was really difficult. So there's been quite a complicated ADR process to replace text. So dubbing, really.
It's difficult filming on Dartmoor.
It's very difficult, and this. I mean, again, that's one of the problems of not having a team. I mean, if you had half a dozen people who could be attending to sound and all the rest of these things, then we might have caught more of these things. But we're having to pick them up in post. So that's part of what slowed down the process. There's also quite a considerable post process anyway. I mean, so there's been a lot of work in developing the sound and the music for the piece. So we've been working with Dan Greensmith, who's sort of thus far been sort of scoring the whole film.
And he worked on Flies with us.
He worked on Flies with us. He's done lots of work with. I know he's done lots of work with you, and he's done lots of work in the theatre. And funnily enough, I think for him it's been. It's that same thing. It's that same learning curve about transitioning from theatre to film, which again seems to be a whole new set of tools and ways of understanding. And Dan's been sort of entirely on board in that process, and sort of learning himself. So we've produced a lot of music. Far more than probably we will actually need, and then there's a process of going round and back to that and distilling that and maybe reshaping that. So again, I think unlike perhaps other films where there's a film and a music score is written for it, we end up going back into this kind of cyclical thing where music sort of then starts to inform the film, and that maybe informs further refinements or edits to the film, and going back to the music, so on and so forth. So,
would you say that's kind of part of the DNA of Baobab?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the DNA of Baobab. I cannot imagine a more commercial a more commercial operation with funding, producers, deadline. I can't imagine them tolerating that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that there are these sort of amazing sort of auteur directors who do work like that, and there's films like Hearts of Darkness and things like that that have been made about these kind of directors, and they're the kind of directors I suspect that probably that we sort of work like, except we don't work in the same system as them, and so we can potter a lot more than somebody like them, although I'm not comparing ourselves to
the greats
in that way at all.
So the film itself, why should anyone care about the film? Why we're going to be releasing it in 2023. Why should anyone watch it? Why, given the fact we're a small team, it's independent film, it really is indie film. At its rawest, why should someone spend some money, spend some time, watching Last Orders?
Because I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting little film. I think it has something to say. It has. So there's a couple of things really, I suppose. First of all, it has the feel of something, I think, beyond us. So it's more than the sum of its parts, if you want. Now, it's kind of interestingly, we've when people have sort of seen parts of it or seen shots of it, particularly friends of ours who might be quite filmic in their understanding, there have been lots of parallels between this work and like Tarkovsky's work, and I absolutely and I can see that, although I can also state categorically that I wasn't really aware of Tarkovsky's work when we started to make this. I was sort of aware of a sort of 1970s feel to something, and I thought that this had something of that feel about it.
I think the only one that I'd seen of Tarkovsky's was Solaris.
Me too, actually, me too. But I hadn't seen Stalker, which is the one lots of people say, it's a bit like that, it's got something like that.
Yeah.
And I can absolutely see that. And I'll take that. I'm happy to take that. So what is it that the film says then in that sense that speaks to people? Well, I do like the tone of it. I like the colour of it, and I'm not necessarily that kind of colour, but I like that sort of 70s feel. I like the way we've sort of. I like the cinematography of it, even though it's it's not, but it's just something about that language of that which isn't. It's not fast. It's not pacey. It's not anything like that. It's a slow story, and it's fundamentally about a relationship. And I think, why care? Because those are the things that ultimately are of value. Relationships are of value, and I think that's fundamentally what it's about. And I think. More so than simply that relationship, I think that in a simple way, it looks at quite a complex idea, which is the one that we've talked about, and it emerged later in the making of the film, which is that for me, the film is really about a trauma. So it's about a sort of rupture or trauma, something catastrophic that has happened. To which it's alluded to, it's referenced, but we don't dwell on that really. The film isn't about dwelling on the trauma. Really what the film looks at, I think, is the way in which we sort of we reassemble ourselves in the face of trauma. We rewrite narrative in the face of trauma, and I mean, I don't know if it's giving too much away about the film, but we're dealing with two main characters who, in a sense, don't remember much. Really, they don't. It's in a space where they don't remember, and that's and the environment makes sure that they don't remember. But somewhere in the background is an idea that there is a trauma, and so they reassemble themselves as a way, I think, of coping with that. We knew when this film came out that this film had something of a resonance around things like Brexit, because there's rupture in it, there's trauma in it, and no matter whatever side you fall on there, it's quite clear that was something of a rupture, something divisive that took place there. But then I think what with COVID and everything else that came along, this feels like a film of its time in some of the things that are present, even though they might not be in the foreground. The film isn't about, it isn't about a kind of virus. It isn't about that kind of thing. And I think when you originally wrote it, it was in a sense a sort of. It was just playing with our sort of literary heroes, wasn't it? It was sort of playing with. It absolutely, those of you that know Beckett, it absolutely reeks of Beckett. You don't need to go far to see the Vladimir and Estragon characters that are appearing in this, and at the same time you can see how, which I suppose in their own way are a nod, more than a nod perhaps, to the sort of Shakespeare's Lear, Gloucester, Fool, Edgar, those kind of characters, and that's very present in the film as well. But then I suppose it became more than simply a sort of homage to that sort of thing, and it says something in its own right about certain things.
But we've not written something that is exclusive to individual. You don't need a vocabulary in theatre. You don't need any of that, do you? Really?
No, you don't.
Let's be fair.
No, you don't. You can watch it for what it is. I just think that I just think that there's a lot of our love of that.
Yeah.
In this.
Is that it?